Hello, my name is Rachel and I'm here today to do another collections video. So for today's collection video I'll be doing my poetry collection. So again, I do have 3 or 4 of my poetry collections in Switzerland, so this will cut to me in Switzerland at the end of this video to show you the rest of those. What I'm going to do is scatter some of the footage I filmed today through my video that I did in England, just because some of these poetry collections tie together, so I just think they'd be better being together, sort of thing. So yeah, so for this bit I'm going to show you some poetry collections that I've read, some poetry collections that I adore and would highly recommend, and then the massive pile of my unread poetry collections. I'm going to just start, to be honest, because I have quite a lot of books to show you. So the first one is a collected works of Emily Dickinson's poetry, and this is published by Phoenix Orion Books. But then I also have another one, which is the Everyman's Poetry Edition, which has more in. I've read both of these. I did Emily Dickinson for A-level, and so I had to read quite a lot of her poems, and also I just really enjoy Emily Dickinson. She was one of the first poets that I really read and just really understood and got, and it made me less scared of poetry. So that's the first one. Then we have Poems of the Great War. Again, I did this for my second year in A-level because we did a big thing on the First World War, and yeah, quite enjoy war poetry actually, it's quite good. Then I have The Rape of the Lock by Alexander Pope. This is one that I did at university as part of a satire class and adored. It was so funny. Oh my god, it's literally one of the funniest things I've ever read. And also, at the end of this, it has a lot of interpretations and explanations, and the notes go in detail from this is line 89 to 140, and it tells you an exact synopsis of what was going on. So if you do find poetry hard, this is a really, really good edition. And yeah, this is hella funny. Then I have Skivity. This is another one that I did at A-level and I really, really enjoyed. Again, this is one of the first that I proper started to understand, which was nice. And yeah, I reread this at the start of this year, or maybe at the end of last year, and really, really enjoyed the reread as well, so that's cool. Then I have The Hungry Ghost Festival by Jen Campbell. This was one that it was there was a few poems in it that I really, really liked and stood out and loved, but then there were a few poems that were kind of more just okay. So yeah, this was quite good. And then I have Citizen, an American Lyric by Claudia Rankin. I wasn't overly fond of this. I do have a review for this. I think I talked about it in one of my wrap-ups, but yeah, I just wasn't overly fond. It felt like she was making a lot of demands and outrage and all these things, but it wasn't really productive. And I'm not saying that you have to be productive, you should just be able to be yourself and not be judged, and if you are, yeah, you should be able to point it out without having to come up with an answer. But at this point, we know what the world's like and we know it's shit, and it's hard to see a way out of all these problems. And yeah, so I feel when people do these things, it's we should all be coming up with solutions, not just slagging off the situation, because just slagging off the situation is ways that you end up with idiot presidents in America. So yeah, I wasn't amazed by this, but it was okay. And then I have some of my favourite poems that I would highly, highly, highly recommend. The first one is William Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience. This is also a fantastic edition. This is published by Oxford University Press, but this is the original text of Songs of Innocence and Experience. So it has the original engravings and pictures that he drew around the poems, and then on the next page it'll have the translations of the poems if you can't read that. And it's just really, really good. I did this for A-level and again loved it. I really enjoyed A-level because we read a lot of poems, a lot of poets, that I was like, oh, I understand poetry. Yeah, which is I think why I enjoy it now and read it through choice, which a lot of people don't do because it's so hard that they can't wait to get rid of it. So yeah, I think it's all about starting off with the right poets, to be honest. John Donne, who I did some of his poetry at university and loved it. He's a metaphysical poet and just absolutely fantastic. He writes some of the most beautiful poems in the world. He has a love poem that is literally my favourite. Oh my god, it's my favourite love poem of all time. It's so beautiful. A Valediction Forbidden Morning. It might be that one. It's basically one where he talks about a pair of compasses and how, like, in long distance relationships, you're like a compass, and although you come apart, you're still connected, and all this is just beautiful. But then he also writes really funny poems like The Flea, which is just hilarious. Where some guy is basically saying, "Oh, you've been bit by the flea that bit me, so it's kind of mixed our blood. So like, it's kind of like we've already had sex, so we should just like do that now," which is just hilarious. So he's brilliant. A selection of Rochester's poems, and this is an Oxford University Press edition. Oh, Rochester is another one who's fucking hilarious. He's a satirical poet, and we did him in the satirical class that I did at university. And he's funny. He's not scared of talking about sex or like the rulers of the age. I think he has poems that talk about the king and stuff. And he's just hilarious. Like, there's a girl masturbating in one of his poems, which is just ridiculous for the year it was. I think it's like the 18th or 17th century or something that he was writing in. He was born in 1647, so like you can imagine having stuff like that in his poetry. It's quite outrageous for the time. But also... And then I have two modern poets. So we have Undying, a Love Story by Michelle Faber. I adored this. This made me cry so much, and I just found it one of the most beautiful collections ever. Michelle Faber wrote, I think, 2 or 3 of these poems as his wife was dying from cancer, and then all the rest of the poems after his wife had died as his like way of trying to deal with what was going on. And yeah, this isn't for the faint-hearted. It's hard to read, but it is absolutely beautiful. And then I have Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, which I loved. I think Rupi Kaur is fantastic. She's one of my favourite poets, and this is just, I love this. Rupi Kaur does like little illustrations to go along with her poems, and this is kind of about people trying to keep women down and women having like inner strength and all this sort of stuff, and it's just cool. So as well as Milk and Honey, I have some other Rupi Kaur things to show you. So the first is Milk and Honig. This is Milk and Honey in German. So I decided to get this because I thought it would be a really good way to try and practice translating German. Obviously some of the poems are as small as this, so it'll be very easy to translate something that small instead of going for a big book when I don't know a lot of German yet, so going for a big book is quite difficult. So yes, I have this, and this is a much nicer edition than my English edition. Like, it's a really big hardback copy, and I just think it's so pretty. So yeah, I have that one. And the other Rupi Kaur book I have is The Sun and Her Flowers, which I just read a few days ago and adored. I thought it was fantastic. I think I give it 4.5 stars, just because it wasn't quite as good as Milk and Honey, but it was still fantastic and miles above a lot of poetry collections that I've read, and I just absolutely adored this. It was so good. Covers a lot more topics than Milk and Honey. So Milk and Honey obviously focused on feminism and loving yourself, accepting yourself, and all of these cool things, but then this it carried those topics, but then it went further than that. It talked about a lot about her mother and sort of being in a foreign country and things like that, which I really enjoyed. They were some of my favourite poems in here. It talked about brutality and just really cool stuff, and I really enjoyed this. It was fantastic. Rupi Kaur does her poems with little illustrations throughout, and I love that they are just small illustrations. There's no detail, like faces don't have the details of eyes and mouths and things like that, but they're so well formulated and they fit so much in the poetry that, yeah, I just think they're brilliant. So they are all my Rupi Kaur books. So then I have two that kind of aren't poetry collections, they're stories, but they're told using poetry. They're very odd. I don't know if I should include them in this, but I feel like I want to, so I'm gonna. The first is One by Sarah Crossan. This is a YA book about two conjoined twins and sort of their life basically at school, but this is told in like blank verse poetry. And it's really, really cool. And yeah, if you haven't read much poetry, this is a really good place to start because it's so easy, it's so quick to read, and it really packs a punch. So then, as well as reading One by Sarah Crossan, I've also read this month Moonrise by Sarah Crossan. I read this the other day and loved it. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought this was better than One. I can't remember what I gave One, whether it was like, I think it might have been 4 stars. Now I think it'd probably be 3.5, just because this is a lot better. This deals with police brutality and the family surrounding criminals and sort of the treatment of them, and just it was fantastic. It was really, really good. And again, this is told in her amazing format of poetry. It's like open verse. It's just fantastic, and I love that you get so little, but what she gives you is the exact thing you need to complete. Like, I completely picture the scene, and like I would in any other book, it's completely formulated in my head. There's nothing missing, even though there's so much less description in here. So that, yeah, this is fantastic. It's really, really good. I love it. So there's that one. And then I have The Christmas Truce by Caroline Duffy, which I think is about the sort of football game that went on during the First World War between the Germans and the English, when all the French, was it German and the French or German and the English? Maybe it was English and French and then the Germans on the other side. But yeah, on Christmas Eve they like stopped fighting and had a game of football, because that's just adorable. And it was in 1914. So yeah, I really want to read this Christmas. I think it'll be just one of the best things to read. And this is a poem about it with little illustrations on the other side. So, and then I just have my other unread ones. So the first is my Everyman's Poetry collections. So I have Thomas Hardy, who I really do want to read the poetry of because I love his writing style in his novels, and I think it'll be one of those where like it'll transcend really beautifully to poetry writing, because obviously it's so figurative, and like that sort of beauty in writing is so brilliant in poetry that I think he'd be really good at it. We have Geoffrey Chaucer. I've not read any Chaucer, embarrassingly enough. So I really do want to pick some up at some point. Then we have W.B. Yeats, who I have read a few poems out of here, but I've just not read all of them, but I do enjoy Yeats. Then we have William Blake, which I've probably read half the poems in here because I'm guessing quite a lot of them will be from Songs of Innocence and Experience. And then there's William Wordsworth, which again I've read a few poems out of this collection, but not all of. So there's that one. Then I have Selected Poetry and Prose of Byron. This is one that I would love to pick up because the Brontes are so fascinated with Byron, and I adore Byronic heroes, which obviously comes from Byron and Byron's writing. So I kind of think I would really enjoy it. So I really do want to pick some of his stuff up at some point. Then I have the poetry of E.E. Cummins, which I've like always wanted to read, but I've never been overly pushed to want to read it. And then I think it was Ariel I heard talking about E.E. Cummins and how much she loves his poetry and how it's like her favourite poetry, and I was thinking I never thought of him as being like that brilliant. So yeah, he's kind of going up my pile, to be honest. I might try and read him soon and see how his poetry is. So there's that one. Then we have two more modern poetry collections. The first is The Bee by Caroline Duffy. I've not read any Caroline Duffy, embarrassingly enough, so this would be cool to read. This is the next thing she wrote after Rapture, which I've heard is one of her best poetry collections ever. I do think I'll start with this because it's beautiful, but even though a lot of people say to start with Rapture, I feel like this is just beautiful. And she wrote this when she was Poet Laureate, which is pretty awesome. And then I have Lullabies by Langliav. I bought this because I just thought it was beautiful, and I loved the poem on the back, which says, "Time, you are the one I wanted most to stay, but time could not be kept at bay. The more it goes, the more it's gone, the more it takes away." And I read a few poems at the start and thought they were beautiful as well. So I was really excited for this, but then after I picked it up I realised there's a poetry collection before it, and I'm not sure if I need to read that one first before I read this one. So that's why I've not read this one as quickly as I would have hoped. And then we have two older poems. So we have Samson Agonistes and Other Poems by John Milton. This is one of those books I lied about reading at university for a tragedy class because it was long and difficult to read, and yeah, so I just lied. But it is one that I will hope to read, and when we were doing the seminars on it, it did sound really interesting. I just didn't have the time, so I do hope to read that one day. And then we have The Sonnets and A Lover's Complaint by William Shakespeare. I love William Shakespeare's sonnets, especially the 1 to 20, where there's this ambiguous gendered person that he's talking about. I adore those poems, especially I think it is number 20 that is my favourite. I think it's one of the most beautiful poems in the world, especially this one, number 20. It's just so it says, "A woman's face with nature's own hand painted, hast thou the master mistress of my passion, a woman's gentle heart but not acquainted with shifting change as is false woman's fashion, an eye more bright than theirs, less false in rolling, gliding the object whereupon it gazeth, a man in hue all hues in its controlling, which steals men's eyes and women's souls amazeth, and for a woman wert thou first created, till nature as she wrought thee fell a-doting, and by addition me of thee defeated, by adding one thing to my purpose nothing, but since she pricked thee out for woman's pleasure, mine be thy love, and thy love's use thy treasure." Oh my god, I just love it. So yeah, I have read quite a lot of Shakespeare sonnets, because I did a lot at university for my Renaissance class, and I've read this much of this collection, but yeah, not finished it yet, so have those ones. And then after that I have my antique book collection. So these are basically just books that were published a very long time ago, and I just get excited by things like that. So this one is The Poetical Works of Percy Bysshe Shelley, Volume 1, Lyrics and Short Poems, and I'm not sure when this was published, but it was awarded as a day school prize to Gertrude Hollingworth for success in London University, and that was in July 1910, so it's at least over 100 years old, so that's super cool. Then I have this, which is Tennyson's works. This is kind of falling completely apart, that's because it's uber old, but it smells amazing. And this was published in 1880 in London, and it's old enough, there's some old antique books where they're so old that they have tracing paper over the drawings, because they can actually come off on the pages, because it's not like the printing that we have now, which I love. And yeah, I have read quite a few of Tennyson's works, because we did him at university, and I remember I did him for one of my exams, so I've definitely read quite a lot of his works. Then I have this little collection of Blake poetry. Oh, so this was given as an award in 1939, but it was published in 1924. So yeah, and this, oh, it has a little newspaper cutting of Town and Country by William Blake. A little poetry, piece of poetry that must have been put in the newspaper. That's cute. That's adorable. I have this, which is Moore's Poetical Works. This has a bobble on it. This bobble was here when I bought it. Like, I didn't do this. I'm not that bad. But obviously, you can see why the bobble is there. This book is just in pieces completely, but it is just beautiful. I love it. This one has a little poem that someone wrote someone else that they'd given the book to that says, "May time who sheds his light over all and daily dooms some joy to death, over thee let years so gently fall, they shall not crush one flower beneath, as half in shade and half in sun this world along its path advances. May that side the sun's upon be all that ever shall meet thy glances." Just adorable. Love it if someone wrote that in a book for me. This one is, for what I know, my oldest book that I have, and this is Cowper's Poetical Works. And this is so cute. This was published in 1836 and is just so adorable. Just so adorable. And again, smells amazing. This kind of reminds me of like the tiny books that they're always reading in Jane Austen, when they do like adaptations and stuff, and they're always reading these like adorable little tiny books like this. Reminds me of that. But yeah, there's that one. The next three I think I already filmed videos for when I was at home, but because I've read all of them since I filmed that video, so I thought I would just read it. So the first one is The Best Poems of the Bronte Sisters. This is just some of Emily, Anne and Charlotte's poetry, and this was okay. I gave it 3 stars, I think. Charlotte's poetry is by far my favourite. Anne's is beautiful, very tragic, really enjoyed hers. Charlotte's I wasn't that keen on. This is okay. I mean, I think now that I'm starting to read more current poetry and really loving it, I'm realising that some of the older poetry isn't really for me. Some of it is, obviously, like Browning poetry is always going to be for me. He has a really amazing style. But yeah, classics like this, I don't know if they're quite my thing, but it was enjoyable. The next one that I've read is The Princess Saves Herself in This One by Amanda Lovelace, and I really enjoyed this. I think I gave it 4 stars, but I think it's a 3.5 on reflection. And this covers feminism, self-acceptance, abuse. It can be triggering at times. She talks about self-harm, she talks about eating disorders, she talks about abuse from partners. So yeah, it can be a bit of a troubling one. But I saw last night that Amanda Lovelace has a new poetry collection coming out in February, so I'm very excited for that, and we'll definitely be picking that up. And yeah, this is a really good one. I would definitely pick this up, especially if you like things like Milk and Honey and The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. This is definitely in the same vein. And then the other one is Let Them Eat Chaos by Kate Tempest. I think I read this month, and I gave it a 3 stars at the time, but I think actually it's a 2 stars. Because 2 stars is it's okay. This is told from different perspectives of 7 people, and I think 2 or 3 of the perspectives I enjoyed. One of them I thought was really fantastic, but yeah, nothing about it was really amazing for me. It just, I don't know, it just wasn't amazing. So yeah, it's okay. It's an okay read. I do have another poetry collection by Kate Tempest though, which is Hold Your Own, which I'm a lot more excited for and I think will be a lot better. So on the back this one says, walking in the forest one morning, a young man disturbs 2 copulating snakes and is punished by the goddess Hera, who turns him into a woman. And I think this basically is around sexuality and gender and a lot of classical history. Then I have Jabberwocky and Other Poems by Lewis Carroll. and I just want to read this because I love Alice in Wonderland, I love Through the Looking Glass. We did some of the poetry during my degree. I think we did it in our Victorian Lit class because we were doing Through the Looking Glass. But I would definitely like to have read all of them because there isn't actually that many, and he just has the most wacky, kooky writing style and ideas to write about that I just think it'd be really cool. Then I have one of my favourite poets, and that is Robert Browning. This is My Last Duchess and Other Poems, unabridged. I haven't read this full collection, but I've read a lot of Browning because I did some essays on him at university, and I just love his poems. So Robert Browning does dramatic monologues, and basically they tend to be from like a character's perspective. So there is always like a story in his, well, not always, but there tends to be a story within his poems, and I just love him. I love Porphyry's Lover. I love My Last Duchess, which is the poem he's most famous for. Soliloquy of the Spanish Cloister, that's a fantastic poem. And yeah, I just really like Browning, so I'm hoping to read all of this collection. I did want to read it for Victober, but with all my other reading, I just didn't get around to it. But yes, this is one that I definitely want to read all of at some point. And then I have two favourite books. The first is Seamus Heaney's North. This is all about Ireland and Irish history, and my friend was doing this for one of her university classes, I think it was modernism or something like that I didn't do, but she was talking to me about this poetry collection and I always wanted to read it, and so yeah, I'm going to. And the other one I have is Crow by Ted Hughes, that I've also not read, and this is about a crow apparently going through big moments in history and observing them and that sort of thing. And the reason I want to read this is because I want to reread Grief Thing with Feathers, which is loosely based on Crow. You don't have to have read Crow to read Grief Thing with Feathers. Obviously I didn't, and I still love this. It's one of my favourite books, maybe of all time. So yeah, but I really want to read this, then I can reread this. Like, that's just something I'm so excited for. So yeah, have them. And then the last one is The Night's Darkening Around Me by Emily Bronte, which, as I mentioned with this one, Emily Bronte's was definitely my favourite poetry out of here, and I am actually enjoying this one a lot more than I did that collection. I'm going to try and finish this today or tomorrow just so that I can put it in my November wrap up. But yes, this is really good. This is actually quite a good edition, the Little Black Classics edition, just because it's really small, so you can just carry it around with you. It fits in like your coat pocket, so you don't even need to take a bag, and you can still have a book. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this so far. Her poetry is quite dark, but very enjoyable. So yes, and that is my poetry collection video. I think that is all the poems I have. Actually, no, it's not. I just remembered there is a poetry collection that I have in England that I didn't mention in that video, and it is a complete works of Dylan Thomas. I will insert a picture. I don't really know what it's about, I just know that I have it, to be honest. Yeah, if you're starting with poetry, I would highly recommend Griefest Thing with Feathers and Sarah Crossan books, just if you want like a transition, because they're like poetry but also a fully fledged fiction novel as well. So there's that one. And then also Ruby Core is fantastic. You should pick Ruby Core up. So yeah, if you are starting out with poetry, I would definitely recommend these four as fantastic starting points. So yes, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!